All right, guys, so I just barely got done looking at this house. We just pulled the trigger on it, closed on it actually a couple weeks ago, and I am deciding what to do with it. So there's a couple different options. I wanted to talk with you guys through them so you can kind of understand my thought process and what I go through when I'm deciding what exactly I should do with the house. So this one's cool because we have quite a few options, and I'm gonna run you guys through them, and you can kind of help me decide what's gonna make the most sense and get the biggest return on this property. All right, so now we are back at the office. So this property is really special to me for a lot of different reasons. I've actually been waiting for it to come up for sale for quite a while now. So now that I actually have it and have closed on it and officially own it, I have a lot of options. And so I need to go through them, and I want to make this video as authentic as possible. So I didn't want to spend a ton of time in my mind or on paper really designing it and figuring out which would be the best option, rather than just think it out loud and walk through the process with you guys and what I would normally do, just so you can help understand it and hopefully replicate the entire process. So diving into it, the first thing that's important to know and to understand is the reason I bought this property. Like I said, I've been waiting for it to come up on the market for quite a while. The reason is I own the house right next door, okay? Now, because I've owned this house for about 5 or 6 years, I actually used to live in it. There's a duplex underneath, so I rented out the basement. There's a full kitchen down there. My wife and I lived in the upstairs. It was our first house that we lived in together. Not my first rental property, but our first house that we lived in together. Now, this property has a huge backyard. It's really, really deep. And so what we did is when we bought the property, we said, hey, let's see if we can add additional units in the back. We looked up the zoning, and the zoning was R3, which means multifamily. So we're like, sweet, we can have multiple units on the property. And so we went in the city, trying to see if we could get it approved. Well, what we found out was the lot was not wide enough. So because it wasn't wide enough, we didn't have access to be able to have a two-way driveway so that people could pass each other when they were coming to basically the back of the house to get to the other units. And so we kind of like chalked it up for what it was. The house was still an amazing investment, not considering that we couldn't do all that in the back, okay? So what we ended up doing was obviously buying this house next door. And because of the house next door, it was in the exact same situation. Really deep, big backyard, a skinny lot, but extra deep. And so they're next door to each other, and there's a gap in between the homes. And so our thought process was, hey, if we bought this house next door, now we can utilize both backyards. It's zoned for an apartment complex, right? Multifamily, we have a lot of options that we can do with it. Plus, on top of all of that, it's about 3 houses away from college campus. Well, if you guys know a lot of our strategies, what we'll do is we'll rent things out to students, and we'll rent them by the room, and we'll get really, really high cash flow on these properties that are close to campus. And so either way, it was close to college campus, and it was gonna be an amazing house to get. And ultimately, we knew we were gonna be able to utilize both of the backyards, which it was really like buying a house with a lot, with an even bigger lot, because we own the home next door. So because of this, right out the gate, we knew we were willing to pay more than anybody else probably for the property. And in fact, when we put an offer in, we even put it with an escalation clause, which just said, hey, this is my offer. I will also pay up to this much more if anybody else bids higher than me, and then that would be the ultimate sale price, okay? So long story short, on this property, it was listed for $299,000, and they came out and appraised it, and it ended up appraising for $285,000, which the only downside with that was the seller said, hey, we're not gonna take $285,000. Our offer was at $299,000. We want that, right? So what that means is the bank's only gonna loan up to that $285,000 mark, and you have to come up with cash if you're gonna still get the deal done. So we ended up doing that. It was an extra $15,000 on top of our down payment, okay? So we're into this one a little bit more cash than we normally would be because of that scenario. But like I said, for us, we were even willing to pay an extra $100,000 or $150,000 over asking price because we knew how valuable that land was, especially with us owning the house right next door. So now that you understand the property a little bit, I'll give you guys a breakdown on it, a brief run through. This is what it looked like on the inside. When we first bought it, it has really, like, when you come in, this room off to the side that's not really a bedroom. So if you don't include that, there's really only 2 bedrooms upstairs, which they happen to connect together with one door, which obviously that's not gonna work. So something I'm looking at right off the bat is if I'm renting this out, I'm gonna frame that out so that they both don't have access to each other. Now you can see the kitchen is really old, and if you go down to the basement, a lot of it's not finished necessarily, but you do have 1 bedroom down in the basement. So ultimately, you have 2 bathrooms. It's actually 1.5 bathrooms because the downstairs bathroom does not have a shower. The house is about 1,500 square feet, and I guess according to what you actually see here, it's 3 bed, 1.5 bath house. So now you have a background on it, you have all the information on it. There are a few things that I can do with this property. Obviously, I know ultimately I'm gonna put an apartment complex in the back. That's what I'm gonna do. So the first thing I did, and this was actually going through the due diligence process, I reached out to my architect and I said, hey, how many units could I do in the back? Because I wanted to know how much I could rent each unit out for, which I already know that, but based on parking and what the city is going to allow and require, which is 0.75 parking spaces per bedroom. Okay, so I knew that going into it, and that would let me know how many parking spaces I need, which left us with how much building space we had and then how high we could build, and ultimately that allowed us to mix and match how many units we could do with how many bedrooms. So this is ultimately the layout that we came out with, and it's going to work for all of the backyard. Okay, and you can see right here it allows for 22 bedrooms. And what's cool about this is some of those can be shared and some of those can be single. The cool thing about being a shared room is I'm gonna get a little bit more rent. Let's say that each shared room rents for $300 per person, which means I get $600 out of the room, and each single room, let's say, rents for $375 per person. So you can obviously see, like, one I'm making $600 per room and the other one I'm making $375, which when you multiply that by a lot of rooms, it starts to add up. So just something to be aware of and that you guys can use and incorporate as you're going through and looking at deals and analyzing deals. So ultimately I have 3 scenarios with this house. Obviously the apartment's going in the back. That's gonna happen at some point. We know that no matter what, okay? That leaves me with options. One, I could turn this house into a student rental, which what's gonna make the most sense there is it's gonna have to be a rent by the room scenario. I'm obviously gonna wanna convert some of these rooms maybe into bedrooms, right? Like the office sitting gathering area on the side. I wanna frame that out, make that into a bedroom so I can get more rent out of that, as well as in the basement, try to figure out a way where I can maybe get one more bedroom. If I can't get another bedroom, I at least need to figure out a way to take that bathroom and turn that into a full bath and just put like a shower in there so that I can have more students in there and they all have a place to shower versus only sharing one bathroom, okay? My option number 2 is I can make it an Airbnb. I could remodel it a little bit and turn it into an Airbnb. It'll be a nightly rental. It's close to everything. Airbnbs in the area are doing pretty well right now. The pros and cons of that, like the pros, obviously, I would do well. I already know it would do well. There's demand for it. I have some in the area already. The cons, I'd probably need to remodel it. It's gonna be a little bit more of a maintenance project, checking in with guests, worrying about those things, and then getting it ready. It takes a lot to get it ready. You have to have beds, you have to have bedding, you have to have silverware, right? All of those things. Ultimately, is that worth it? And then option number 3 would be just to demo the house completely. And then what I would do is have more space to add more units, okay? And as I'm going through my mind, like a lot of people might just buy the house and think like, okay, I'm just gonna rent it to college students, or I'm just gonna, you know, they might only look at one scenario, or like I'm just buying it and I'm just gonna demo it right off the bat. What I wanna do, and this is so important because you're gonna do this in every single deal moving forward, is what makes the most sense from a numbers standpoint. For me, it's very, very logical. It's not an emotional decision. What I wanna do is take out as much of the emotion out of it and make it a logical decision. So what I'll do is I'll go through and I'll do the numbers, right? So for me, if I'm looking at making this a student rental, I want to look at what are the costs associated with making this a student rental. Okay, I know I'm going to have to go in and add an insert for a shower downstairs. How much is that gonna cost? Well, the insert where the shower is gonna go, there's also a washer and dryer there. So I'm gonna have to remove those and find a different spot for them, which means I might need to rewire gas, or I might need to, put an outlet or run some power over here. How much is that going to cost me? If there is space to add an extra bedroom, right? Framing off that wall upstairs, adding a door there, what's that going to cost me? And then I want to compare that to what I'm actually going to get out of it, right? How does that compare my costs going into that and my return coming out? Well, I know I can rent it per room. I know that some of these rooms are big enough to be shared, and some of them I can't quite fit shared. It's going to be a single person. So in this scenario, like 2 of them I could make shared, and 2 of them would be singles. So right off the bat, like I'm going to start doing the math. I know that these 2 that are single, I can rent them out for $375, right? So I have $375 times 2. And then that leaves me with 2 other bedrooms where each of those could be shared, and they're gonna rent out for $600 each bedroom, right? So I start doing the math and add all that up, which is $375 times 2, which is gonna be $750, and then $750 plus $1,200, which is gonna be $1,950, right? So now I know I can get $1,950, and then I would go through and I'd get bids, or I'd maybe look in more depth, how much is it gonna cost me to get it up to par to where it needs to be to rent to students, okay? The other option is Airbnb. Like I said, I'm gonna look at my other properties in the area. How are they performing? On average, they're probably making about $2,500 a month with this type of a property with same bedroom, bathroom. Now I wanna look at what's the minimum amount of money I can spend on this that's gonna get me up to the most amount of money coming in on it, right? And then I wanna compare that with the other scenario. Our third option, which was just to demo the whole thing. How much does it cost to demo it? And after I demo it, how many units can I actually build? And is that gonna offset the amount of income enough to make it worth it? And then on top of that, how much is it actually gonna cost me to build those units? That's gonna be expensive. That's a lot more money than just a simple rehab or a remodel. The fourth option, which I didn't go over, which is a very, very valid option, because of the zoning and because there's already a separate entrance around the back, what I can do is I can convert it to a duplex. So I wanna look at that. If I convert it to a duplex, I already know, okay, downstairs really it would be a 1 bedroom. I'd add a kitchenette. I'd have to take the laundry out, obviously put in the shower, and then also find laundry to be able to put upstairs, which there's this closet right here. What I could maybe do is run it through and do a stackable washer and dryer. So it's definitely an option to be able to turn into a duplex. If I did that and the basement was just a 1 bedroom apartment, I could probably get, let's say, $900 out of that. What I would do with the upstairs, same thing. I'm gonna go through the scenarios. I could do all students. I could do a family and put a family in there. What's a family gonna pay for a 2-bed, 1-bathroom house? Or I could Airbnb it. Like, what's gonna make the most sense? And just kind of going off the top of my head with what things go for. A 2-bedroom, or I can make it a 3-bedroom. Like I said, if we convert that room in the front and just put a wall there and a door and add a closet, then it would be 3-bed, 1 bath, which I'm probably gonna be able to get, maybe if I remodeled it well, $1,300. So now we have $1,300 plus $900, it's $2,200. Now, I don't wanna bombard you and overwhelm you with all of the numbers, but ultimately what I'm looking at is, okay, $2,200 for the top and the bottom, where if I just did students, it's $1,950. That's a difference of $250 a month. How long does it take me making an extra $250 a month to make up for having to go through, add another kitchen, reroute the washer and dryer so I have one upstairs and downstairs, right? So the point of this whole video is I want you guys to understand that sometimes it takes just going through all of the scenarios and looking at the pros and looking at the cons to figure out what's going to be the best. Ultimately, I know this property is gonna be a home run. I know because of the back and what I can do with it and building an apartment complex this close to college campus, it's going to be a home run deal. Now I'm just figuring out a way to make this other one work. We didn't even dive into the amount of money that I put down on the property, what the mortgage and expenses are, right? Which is what you really wanna know ultimately when you're buying a property in general. This one, my expenses are gonna be about $1,400 a month, right? So based on $1,400 and based on my 20% down payment that I put in on the house, how quick am I making my money back? Is it a good return or isn't it a good return, right? Like I said, with this particular house, I wasn't as concerned with making a ton of money or cash flowing a ton of money every single month off of the house alone. I more got it for the back. But in a typical house, that's what I'm looking for, right? My $1,400 that I have to pay every single month, how much am I getting from rent? And is that gap, which we call cash flow, is that worth it? So hopefully this video added value. Hopefully you can take these principles and just understanding it a little bit, you apply this to every single deal, every single opportunity that you get to buy a property. Hey, what can I do here? Could I do this here? Could I convert the master? Could I put a kitchenette in the master and seal it off and have that a separate place? Could I Airbnb that, or is it better for a couple? All of these things I want you guys to consider as you're going through your properties, and ultimately it's gonna help you maximize the amount of cash that you can get out of the property. As always, make sure you're following like the guidelines with your local laws and ordinances and all of those things. But ultimately, let's apply these principles to help increase your passive monthly cash flow.